Hello everyone and welcome to another Raids 3 video. Now, if you've not seen the news, Jagex have just released a balance and bug fixing blog for the Tombs of Amascut, and that was today, about half an hour ago in my time. Now, this makes a lot of the complete and in-depth guides that I've been doing not redundant. Most of the information is still correct, but a few things in them have changed. So I feel like it's my place to make this video so that anyone that's getting misinformation from those guides now can actually get the correct information from here. I'm going to go through it section by section. I'm going to say what it is and give my opinion, and if a change warrants a comparison between a new video and an old video of the raid, I'll put them side by side and we can see the difference. Before we get into this, again, thanks a lot to everyone for watching the Raids 3 content. It's been popping off and people have been enjoying it. Like I said, the guides might seem a little bit redundant now, but 95% plus of the information in them is still completely accurate and a really good guide, so go check them out if you've not. Also, I recently created a Discord server. Link will be in the comments. Feel free to join and come and hang out. Let's get into the video. First, we'll go over the balance changes. Now, the balance changes are not going to be bug fixes, obviously. These are changes to the mechanics of the fight or the stats of each boss. First, we'll go over Zebak. Now for Zebak, the first thing they've done is raised its base hit points by 10%. This is just intended to make the fight a little bit longer so more of its mechanics get used, because people were killing it too quickly. Next, they increased the base number of jugs by 2. There were a lot of feedback that in some jug setups, people found it hard to position properly and push the jugs properly, so they've added some jugs to every single rotation now, which makes it a little bit easier. Also on the topic of jugs, they no longer have a set attack delay, but they still respect it as the wording says. So what this means is, if you hit a jug and then hit Zebak, you'll be able to do it instantly. But if you hit Zebak and then try attacking a jug, you'll have to wait for your attack to cool down based on the tick of your weapon. I'll show this off now. As you can see, you can hit the jug and then hit Zebak straight away, but if you try doing it the other way around, you can't. Finally, there's one more change to jugs, which I'll also show. Jugs roll 2 tiles further before stopping, and that's all the changes for Zebak. It is worth noting that in the Zebak fight now, because you can hit a jug and then the boss without losing any ticks, while the waves are coming, you can right click hit a jug and then hit the boss, right click hit a jug then hit the boss, and you won't be losing any ticks, so you'll be damaging the boss while clearing more poison in the room. This could be helpful. Next, we'll take a look at the balance changes for Akkah. Now first, the orbs spawned during the enrage phase, which is the final phase where you have to melee the boss and there's white orbs flying around the screen, will now only deal full damage to one player. Before, it was possible for 2 players to run through and it would damage both. Second, the number of orbs spawned during the enrage phase has been slightly reduced. A lot of players left feedback saying they felt like they were almost all unavoidable, so it wasn't really feasible, so they have reduced the amount. I'll put a comparison up now. To compensate for this, however, the base damage of the phase orbs has been increased, but they cap out at 25. So at lower invocation levels, they'll deal more damage than they did before, and at higher invocation levels, they'll cap out at 25, so they're not severely punishing. And finally, a problematic one for the people that like doing the butterfly method on Akkah. Akkah will change styles if he hasn't swapped for over 60 seconds. This means yes, you can kite him around the room for 60 seconds still, or use the butterfly method for 60 seconds, but you're not allowed to do it anymore. You can do it for a minute, every time that is in the melee phase, and that's it. However, that doesn't mean the method is totally redundant. The method can still be used for a minute, every part of the fight. So, bear that in mind before he swaps over to his melee. It is worth noting, however, that I did test this in my run, and it does seem to be a little bit bugged. After a minute, he did use a special attack, the trail, but he didn't swap his prayers, so you could still continue to run around the room maging him and he was set to melee. But on the second minute, he did swap his prayers when he used the memory attack. I'm not sure if this is intentional. From the wording, it doesn't seem so bear that in mind as you go in. You might be able to get 2 minutes of butterfly method still, before you actually change his style. Next, we'll look at Barbar. Now, there's not much here, but he is looking generally healthy, as Jagex have said. Firstly, the bananas spawned via the jungle japes invocation now occur on monkey death rather than randomly. Honestly, I thought it worked like that already, so it's a good change and it shouldn't change much. Bananas spawned via the jungle japes invocation now deal significantly reduced damage. They didn't deal too much before, to be honest. I think the highest that I was hitting a 150 was maybe a 24. So, I'm not too sure why that one's there, but hey, less damage is less damage. And finally, the damage done by an open sarcophagi is no longer dealt in a 3x3 area. This makes the gotta have faith invocation a lot easier, assuming that a baboon does open up a sarcophagus. But that's all there is to Barbar here for balance changes. And finally, the Wardens. As you've noticed, I have skipped out on Kefri, and that's because there are actually no balance changes for Kefri. They're like where Kefri's at. So, for the Wardens, there's quite a lot. Firstly, they've adjusted the damage formula for Phase 2 to benefit less from accuracy and have a lower max ceiling. Now, if you'd noticed when you did the P2 fight, you basically hit every single time. I'm not sure on the specifics of this, but I'm assuming it just means you're going to hit a little bit less. Now, they have reduced the core exposure time by 7 cycles as well. Jagex seem to synonymously use cycles as ticks, so this is 7 ticks less. Before, you could get 7 attacks in. Now, you can probably only get 5, depending on the weapons that you use. Bear that in mind, it's going to make the Warden P2 a lot longer. And 1-downs are probably going to be non-existent, but someone will find a method. Third, they've increased the Warden's hit points during Phase 2 for high-scale groups. This doesn't affect solos, only grouping. Fourth, they've slightly reduced the amount of damage dealt to the Warden when successfully clearing the Phase 3 skull mechanic. When you cleared the skull mechanic before, it did damage to the boss. Now, it just deals less. Simple as that. They've also increased the base hit points of the Warden during the final phase, reduced the base allowed duration for solving the skull mechanic in the final phase, and reduced the magic level of the Warden during the final phase. They reduced the magic level, so Twisted Bow's not as good there, which is understandable. They've also reduced the base allowed duration for solving the skull mechanic because it had a lot of leniency on lower invocation levels, especially if you didn't have Insanity on. There was a lot of leniency with it. So now you need to lose a lot less ticks, there's less opportunity for mistakes. And finally, they increased the base hit points of the Warden during Phase 3 because the fight was going too quickly and they felt like people were brute forcing it rather than actually dealing with the mechanics. So this should fix that. Next, we have a couple of changes to the paths. Now, this is only for the Path of Apmeken and the Path of Het. Firstly, we'll do the Path of Het because it's a nice and quick one. They've actually buffed this room. They've changed the health scaling of the seal in the middle for different group sizes. Before, it was kind of a 1-to-1 scaling with team size, so if 2 people in a team of 8 had a low mining level and everyone else had enough for a 1-down, they wouldn't get the 1-down because the people that didn't have the level weren't dealing enough damage and it was scaling 1-to-1. Now it scales a little bit differently, so the seal gains less health per team member, meaning if there are a few team members with lower mining, it's still possible to deal with it. Next, the Path of Apmeken. Now, they have reduced the number of monkeys that spawn in each wave. That means that on my Path to Apmeken and Barbar guide, this is now incorrect. However, I did send a solo and this has not changed by much. If you take a look at this image, as you can see, these are how the waves spawned in solos before the change. Now, it's the exact same, apart from waves 4, 5 and 6 only spawn 2 melee, 2 range and 2 mage minions respectively, rather than the 3. They still spawn the special alongside them that's specified, but they've all been knocked down by 1 monkey, so overall it speeds up the room. Second, they've adjusted the timings of the waves so they overlap more smoothly. I assume this just makes it a faster room overall, and just more clear cut and consistent, so it's a good change overall I imagine. Third, by default, players will now receive 100 potions from the crate rather than 20. I'm not sure what people were doing to use all 20 potions in a fight, but honestly, you should never need more than 20, nowhere near. But it's nice to always have more. And lastly, completing the room will now delete the regular hammer from your inventory, which everyone dropped anyway. So it's a good change. How long until someone's Dragon Warhammer gets deleted by accident though? That's the question. Now we get onto the fun stuff. And probably the most controversial changes that there have been. The mid-raid loot. Now, as you know from watching my Raids 3 videos and everyone else's, or doing Raids 3 yourself, Ambrosia and Liquid Adrenaline are overpowered. So, there have been some changes to them. First, Ambrosia and Liquid Adrenaline are now 1-dose potions. What this means is that you never get a 2-dose Ambrosia or Liquid Adrenaline anymore. They are only 1 dose, so bear that in mind, you're going to get half that you did before. Secondly, the Liquid Adrenaline now rarely shows up in the Chaos Pack. That means it's going to be a lot rarer and you're more than likely going to have to take this from power. Number 3 is that Ambrosia now only shows up in the Life Pack. So not only have they made Ambrosia's 1 dose, they've made it so they can only appear in Life. Meaning that if you want Liquid Adrenaline, you're more than likely going to have to take power to get an overload as well, the smelling salts. And then you're going to have to take a life for the Ambrosia. You can't get both in one bucket anymore. They've also adjusted the quantity of items provided in the Chaos Pack. I'm not sure if this is a buff or a nerf, but either way, they're going to be slightly different. They've increased the amount of run energy that smelling salts restore. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Now the most important one, and this is not controversial at all. The mid-raid loot interface no longer stops your movement, so you'll be able to withdraw your supplies on the fly. I'll show you what this looks like now. As you can see, I can actually move around the room and take things out of the scroll, which is perfect. You can actually click around the room while the interface is open. Such a good change. They've also done some general changes, most of which don't really have an impact on the bosses or the raid itself, but let's go through them anyway. First, players can now boost to hit the prayer level requirement for creating the Eldinis Ward. They're also allowing players to boost to hit the crafting level requirement for creating the Divine Rune Pouch. Again, this is handy for people everywhere, especially Iron Men. Number 3, a very interesting one, and the only one out of this lot that affects bosses directly. They've reduced the number of AoE mechanics that stack with each other. So for example, before, if you were in a team of 3 and you all got a Kefri fireball on the same tile, if you got hit by it, you'd take 3 fireballs worth of damage because all 3 go and hit the same tile. But now what they've done is they've made it so if 2 players are stood on a tile, they'll only take 1 lot of damage, which could lead to some interesting mechanics at places like Kefri. We'll see how that plays out. Fourth, players using the Honor Diet Invocation, which is the one where you can no longer eat food, will no longer be provided with silk dressings or honey locusts. This is just a good change overall because these items are pointless. But what I'm interested in is, are the silk dressings in the life category or any other category going to be replaced with something else? Or are they just taken out entirely and you get less from that category? And the last one is finally the one that everyone's been waiting for. It's been a week. Monster Examine's being re-enabled within the Tombs of Amascut. This means that we've finally got the stats for each boss and can tell which style is best on it. You can check these out on the wiki, but I'll run through each one briefly. Firstly, Akkah is actually weak to stab. Its magic and range defense are also low, but because you can only use one style on it, the only one that's worth bringing up is stab. Its slash defense is 120 and its crush is 120, but its stab is only 60. So stab is the way to go at Akkah. Next, Barbar. The same thing. I personally go for it because it seems accurate, but it does have a 200 range defense. So any other ranged weapon is probably really bad there. It is better to melee this with a slash defense of 160 and a crush defense of 240. They're not recommended. Again, it's only got a stab defense of 80, so it's recommended to use a stab weapon there. Next, Kefri. As expected, everything else is pretty bad on it. It has only got 100 crush defense, so them weapons might be useful, but it only has a 60 stab defense. So as with the theme of the raid, stab is the way to go. Everyone got it right with the rapier in the beginning. Fourth, Zebak. Now, this is the only one where stab's not really the best. Its stab and slash bonuses are 160, but its crush is 260. Its magic is 200, but its range beats them all with only plus 110, which still seems quite high, but because its overall defense is low, then range still shreds Zebak. And finally, the Wardens. The Wardens on P2 have plus 70 defense for every stat apart from magic, which has got a negative 30, and that goes the same for both Wardens. On P3, however, Crush is the best melee style. It's only got plus 20 defense there, but slash and stab are still good with plus 40. Ranged and magic are also plus 20, so you can basically do whatever you want on this last fight. If you want to see any more details, go consult the wiki. All the stats are now on there. Finally, before we get into the bug fixes, the last balancing change is on drop rates. Now again, this is a highly controversial one and has led to a lot of community backlash already. First, they've slightly reduced the base drop chance for tradable uniques. There's been some backlash on this because due to crowdsourcing, people estimated the rates for a purple on a 150 invocation run in a solo were about 1 in 45. Which honestly isn't that bad. It's a fun raid, it's probably slightly faster and more enjoyable than Chambers, where in a solo it's about a 130. But there's been some backlash on that. The next point is that they've slightly increased the effect that raid level has on tradable unique drop rate. They've been monitoring the drop rate since release, and they have made some small changes. They feel like there were too many purples coming in at under 150 and not enough coming in at over 300, so they've just scaled it better. So now, according to the blog, you'll likely see more purples as you start pushing into the 200s compared to 150. But again, people weren't too keen on this idea, so Mod Goblin's been hovering Reddit, and someone said, making the drop rates worse, sources have 150s at 1 in 45 and experts at 130. It's off base and horrendously comparable to Cox drop rates, so we're meant to expect 15 hours per purple. To which Mod Goblin responded, they're not really worse, it's just that the scaling's better with raid level. Normals will not feel noticeably different at all, so if you're currently sending 150s and you do 150s in the future, you're probably going to be hitting about the same purple rate. It's not confirmed yet, but again, estimated at 1 in 45. However, when you start pushing higher, you will notice a significant difference. So sitting at 150 doesn't seem to be the play. Bear that in mind as you're doing your runs. Now, let's get into the bug fixes. Now, first of all, I'll put the old ones on the screen. These are bug fixes that have already been done and are in the game before the 1st of September update. As you can see, there is one that states, players can no longer safe spot Barbar using the fallen rubble in some positions. Now, this is the old safe spot method of hitting from the corner and trapping it behind a rock. The safe spot method I posted on this video here still works as of this update. So, bear that in mind that you can still safe spot and kite Barbar all the way up to max invocation levels. Now, let's have a look at the new bug fixes. These bug fixes are ones that are brand new as of today. First of all, the Osmumten's Fang should now distribute damage accordingly rather than clamping damage at the lowest hits. What this means is, one of its passive effects is that it hits between 15 and 85% of its max hit. Say that your lowest hit at 15% was 5 and your max hit was 51 at 85%. What this was doing in the calculation was it was still rolling 1, 2, 3, 4, and if it hit one of those rolls, it would make it a 5. So you actually had like a 5 in, call it 56 chance of hitting a 5. So it was clamping a lot of hits towards the lower end of the scale. So this is an overall buff to the Fang. You'll probably see it go up in price. Next, one for the overall game, but specifically for raids. Magic damage will no longer be capped at level 120 and is instead capped at 125. This means that weapons that scale from magic damage, like tridents, now scale all the way up to 125. This is because the smelling salts in the raid buff your stats from 99 to 125, so they're needed to account for that. Next, a really useful one. 1-dose variants of Nectar and Tears of Eladinis are now more visually distinct. As you can see on this image, it's a lot easier to see now when they've only got 1 dose. Before, they looked like empty vials. One for all the nerds out there, the Infernal Max Cape no longer has a graphic glitch with the Tumakan's Shadow. Same for the Missouri Mask when worn with the Tumakan's Shadow or Fang, and then back to some raid stuff. The MVP boards had some adjustments made so that players see a wider spread of the various titles. A lot of people were getting the similar titles every raid, so some of them weren't being seen. Now, the next one is one that actually disregards some of the information in my Path to Krondis video, so I'd like to address it. Players can no longer melee Zebak without risking being meleeed back. Before, if you just stepped forward and backwards while meleeing Zebak, if it did a melee attack, you would actually dodge all of the damage. I discussed that in my Path to Krondis and Zebak video. But they've fixed that now, so you can get meleeed when you melee Zebak even walking backwards. Another Zebak one is that the Raw can no longer knock players into safe spots at the edges of the room. There was a chance when being knocked back by Zebak that it'd shove you onto a tile that didn't get damaged by the Raw. That's now being fixed. It is worth noting, however, if you can't clear the jugs and you do stand one tile in front of one of the rocks on the floor, you'll take one lot of raw damage and it'll put you on top of the rock still, and then you won't take any more damage. Bear that in mind. Jugs should no longer roll through rocks. Sometimes it was rare, but you could push a jug through a rock and it'd go straight through it when it's meant to collide and splash. And they should now more reliably explode on contact with a rock. This is essentially the same thing. Now finally a couple of Kefri bugs. Bugs for bugs. The Arcane Scarab, the one with the magic attack that fires all of the red orbs at you, was nullifying damage in some instances. I'm not sure what these were, but that is terrifying. That's now been fixed. And also, it's been teleporting immediately after firing. Now it doesn't teleport in that case, it always waits around in a corner for a bit. When you knock Kefri's shield down, exploding scarabs start flying in. These should now detonate more consistently rather than kind of being random. Finally, there's 2 more. They fixed a bug where players could click through the Warden's Phase 1 obelisk, which is just weird and I'm glad it's fixed. And the tile push during the Warden's Phase 3 no longer pushes players into terrain. And that's all there is for this. Like I said, it's not changed my path videos too much. The only information that's changed is the monkeys, which I've gone over in this video. Barbar is still safe spottable, so that's not changed. And Zebak's melee attack can now damage you. That's basically the only differences between the videos that I put out and now. There's also the fact of Akkah changing attack styles on an interval, which we went over here. I guess that could be something that's missed off of that video as well, but everything's basically the same. I hope you enjoyed this recap. I've tried putting a load of clips together and sent a raid post changes just so we can get a clear comparison of different things in this patch notes. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe. I've been putting out a lot of Raids 3 content, and if you like me for any reason, feel free to join the Discord. It'll be the pinned comment, there'll be a link to the Discord. Love you and leave you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!